What if the reason you feel stuck isn't because your life is hard, but because you've slowly stopped paying attention? Think about it. Not your goals, not your plans, your days. They all kind of feel the same, don't they? You wake up, scroll a little, rush through things, tell yourself you'll do better tomorrow. And somehow, tomorrow keeps repeating. And here's the scary part. You don't even notice it happening. Because nothing feels wrong enough to change. You're not failing dramatically. You're just drifting quietly. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because one day you look up and months have passed, maybe years, and you can't even explain where they went. Let me ask you something. Be honest. When was the last time you felt fully in control of your life? Not motivated, not temporarily inspired, but in control. Or does it feel like you're reacting more than deciding? Like life is happening to you instead of being directed by you? If that hits a little too close, you're not alone. Most people live like this, not because they're lazy, but because they slowly stopped being intentional. And this is where it starts to get uncomfortable. Because the truth is, you didn't wake up one day and decide to waste your life. You just made small choices over and over again without thinking. Skip this, delay that. I'll start tomorrow, just one more time. And those tiny decisions, they stacked, quietly, until they built a version of your life you don't even recognize anymore. Now here's the part nobody tells you. Wasting your life doesn't feel dramatic. It feels normal. That's why it's so hard to notice, because you're not hitting rock bottom. You're just staying comfortable. And comfort can slowly destroy your potential without making a sound. So here's the question you don't want to answer. Why do we keep doing this, even when we know better? Why do we keep choosing easy now over better later? Why do we keep repeating the same patterns that we already know lead nowhere? It doesn't make sense. Unless you understand what's actually happening inside your mind. But before we go there, there's something you need to see clearly. This isn't about time management. It's about identity. Because the person you are right now is a direct result of what you repeatedly tolerate, not what you dream about, what you accept. You accept distractions. You accept inconsistency. You accept good enough. And over time, that becomes your standard. And your standard, that becomes your life. Now pause for a second. Think about your current routine, not the one you want, the one you actually live. Does it match the life you say you want? Or is there a gap? Be honest. Does this feel familiar? Because that gap, that space between intention and action, that's where your life is slipping away. Not all at once, little by little. And here's what makes it even harder. You tell yourself it's temporary. This is just a phase. I'll fix it soon. I just need the right moment. But that moment never comes. Because you're waiting for motivation to fix something that actually requires discipline. And motivation? It's unreliable. It shows up when things are easy and disappears the moment things get uncomfortable. So if your entire life is built on waiting to feel like doing things, you'll stay stuck. Not because you're incapable, but because your system is broken. Now here's where it gets real. This next part changes everything. The problem isn't that you don't know what to do. You already know. Wake up earlier. Be more focused. Stop wasting time. Take action. None of this is new. So why aren't you doing it? That's the real question. And the answer is uncomfortable. Because it forces you to admit something most people avoid. You're not stuck because of your situation. You're stuck because of your patterns. The same thoughts, the same habits, the same excuses, running on repeat. And until you break that loop, nothing changes. Not your results, not your confidence, not your life. But this is where things start to shift. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And once you realize that you've been unconsciously repeating the same day over and over again, you're faced with a choice. Keep going like this, or finally interrupt the cycle. But here's the catch. Interrupting it doesn't feel comfortable. It feels unfamiliar. It feels forced. It feels wrong at first. Because you're going against what your brain is used to. And your brain? It hates change. Even if your current life isn't working, your brain will still try to keep you there. Because familiar feels safe, even when it's holding you back. And that's the trap. But don't worry, because once you understand how this works, you can flip it completely. And when you do, everything starts to feel different. You don't need more time. You need fewer lies. That sounds harsh, but stay with me. Because most of what's keeping you stuck isn't your schedule. It's the story you keep telling yourself about it. I don't have time. I'm just tired. I'll start when things calm down. It feels true. But if you zoom out, it doesn't hold up. Because somehow you still find time to scroll, to watch, to delay. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is wired for comfort. And comfort doesn't care about your future. It only cares about making right now easier. So every time you choose the easy option, you reinforce the same loop. Avoid, temporary relief, guilt, repeat. Sound familiar? It should. Because most people live inside that cycle for years, and they think the problem is discipline. But it's not. It's awareness. Because you can't change a pattern you're not fully conscious of. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable again. You're not just reacting to life. You're training yourself every single day. Every time you avoid something hard, you train your brain to avoid discomfort. Every time you choose distraction, you train your brain to escape focus. Every time you delay, you train your brain to break promises. So the real question isn't, why can't I change? It's, what have I been practicing? Because that's what you're becoming. Not what you want, what you repeat. Now pause. Think about your last few days. What have you been practicing? Focus or distraction? Action or avoidance? Growth or comfort? Be honest, because your answer is your direction. And here's the part nobody wants to admit. You can't build a better life while practicing the same behaviors that created the current one. It doesn't work like that. You don't get a new future with old habits. So something has to change. But not everything. That's where people mess up.
They try to flip their entire life overnight. Wake up at 5, work out, read, be productive all day. And when they fail, they think, "See, I can't do this." But that's not failure. That's bad strategy. Because real change isn't dramatic. It's precise. It's choosing one thing and doing it differently, consistently, even when it feels small, especially when it feels small. Because small actions, repeated daily, rewrite your identity. And identity is what controls everything. Now here's where it gets interesting. Your brain doesn't care about your intentions. It cares about evidence. So if you keep saying, "I'm disciplined," but your actions don't match, your brain doesn't believe you. And eventually, neither do you. But if you start small and actually follow through, something shifts. You prove to yourself, "I do what I say." And that proof, it compounds into confidence, into control, into momentum. Now let me ask you something. Which one are you right now? Stuck or starting? Because there's no middle. You're either reinforcing old patterns or building new ones, even on your off days. Now here's the shift. You stop asking, "What do I feel like doing?" and start asking, "What does the person I want to become do right now?" That question changes everything, because it removes emotion and replaces it with identity. And identity-driven action is powerful. It's not based on mood, it's based on standard. Now here's the part nobody tells you. At first, it feels fake, like you're pretending, like you're forcing something that isn't you. And that's exactly why it works. Because you're breaking the old version of you, the one that got you here, and building a new one on purpose, not by accident. But this is where most people quit. Because it's uncomfortable. Because there's no instant reward. Because no one is watching. And that's when your brain whispers, "Skip it today. You've done enough. Start again tomorrow." And if you listen, you reset the cycle again. So the real challenge isn't starting. It's continuing when it stops feeling exciting. Because that's where change actually happens. Not in the beginning, in the repetition, in the boring moments, in the days where nothing feels different, but everything is quietly changing. Now think about this. What if the life you want isn't far away? What if it's just buried under the habits you haven't changed yet? That's it. Not luck, not timing, patterns. And once you start shifting those patterns, your entire life starts to move. Slowly at first, then all at once. But here's where it gets real. Because the next part is where most people either level up or go right back to where they started. And it has nothing to do with motivation. It has everything to do with what you do when no one is watching.
Because once that standard is in place, everything becomes simpler. Not easier, but clearer. You don't wake up asking, "What do I feel like doing today?" You already know, because your standards decide for you, and that removes the chaos, the overthinking, the constant internal debate. Should I do this? Should I skip it? Maybe later. All of that disappears, because there's no negotiation anymore. And this is where your life starts to feel different. Not perfect, but controlled. And control is what creates peace. Not motivation, not hype. Control. Now here's the part most people never reach, because they stop too early. They start building new habits, feel good for a few days, maybe a week, and then they slip, miss a day, then another, and suddenly they think they failed, so they quit. But that's not failure. That's part of the process, because consistency isn't about being perfect. It's about returning quickly. Every time you fall off, you come back faster. No drama, no guilt spiral, just back to the standard. That's how identity is built, not through flawless execution, but through relentless return. Now think about this. What if you stopped trying to be perfect and focused only on not quitting? How different would your life look in 30 days, in 90 days, a year? Because most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they stop too soon. Now here's where it gets real again. This next idea might change how you see everything. You don't need more information. You need more execution. You already know enough. You know what's wasting your time. You know what you should be doing. So the gap isn't knowledge, it's action. And action comes from standards. Which brings us back to one simple truth. Your life changes the moment your standards change. Not when you feel ready, not when life gets easier. When you decide this is no longer acceptable, and you mean it. Because until something becomes unacceptable, you'll keep tolerating it. And what you tolerate, you repeat. Now pause for a second. What have you been tolerating that you know needs to stop? Be honest. The distractions, the inconsistency, the excuses. Which one is quietly holding your life back? Don't overthink it. You already know. And this is your moment. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. To decide that it ends here. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Because once you decide, your actions start to align. And once your actions align, your identity shifts. And once your identity shifts, your life follows. That's how it works. Not overnight, but inevitably. Now let me leave you with this. A year from now, you won't wish you had more time. You'll wish you had used the time you already had. And the difference between those two lives? It's what you do after moments like this. So don't let this just be another video that made sense for a few minutes and then faded. If this hit you, if something clicked, don't ignore that. Because clarity without action is just another form of procrastination. So do something. Something small, something immediate. Something that proves you're done living on autopilot. Because you don't need a completely new life. You just need to stop the patterns that are quietly destroying the one you have. If this makes sense, say something. Not for me. For you. Because this isn't about motivation. It's about responsibility. Your life is yours. And whether it changes or not, comes down to what you do next. If this hit home, don't just scroll. Subscribe and start taking control of the life you've been delaying.